Welcome to your Canadiens Connection on Rocket Sports Radio. We are proud to be the trusted source for all things Habs for more than a decade. This is the Canadiens Connection podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio, keeping you informed, engaged, and entertained. My name is Michael Spinella, and I'll be your host for the next hour. This is episode 253 of the Canadiens Connection podcast, and I'm pleased to be joined in the studio by my co-host, the editor of the Hockey News Montreal, the founder and the president of Rocket Sports, Mr. Rick Stevens. How are you doing today, Rick?
Doing great, Michael. Glad to be here. Glad to have you here. Glad to have all our listeners here. And I know it's the third week of July, but when you do the math, it's only 7.5 weeks to the Montreal Canadiens rookie camp. And we're going to be talking about that today, amongst other things.
Yeah, a really awesome show lined up today. We'll get you up to date on everything Montreal Canadiens news-wise. And then in segment 2, we have a very, very special guest. We have Marty Biron, who's going to join the chat and talk about goaltending. And then in segment 3, it's a Have Your Say segment. Our Canadiens Connection question of the week is, are you worried about the potential of losing Cayden Primeau on waivers this season? We want to hear from you. And Rick, what's the best way for our listeners to reach out and let us know? You
can reach out to us. We've set up a text line, a Rocket Sports text line. That number is 5853-ROCKET. Easy to remember, 5853-ROCKET. Text us anytime, 24 hours a day. If you got a little bit more to say, you can reach out to us via email. That address is hello@rocketsportsmedia.com.
You can also follow at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Plus, check out the website, canadiensconnection.fm. Now, we have a couple of light stories to start off the show. First off, Kirby Dach has posted some surfing photos on his Instagram, and it includes a video. And honestly, I've never seen somebody so relaxed and zen while being on a surfboard.
And he says it's his token or annual surfboard picture. We see a lot of photos or a lot of video these days and stories of players on the ice. We talked about Juraj Slafkovský last week, and he's in Slovakia, and he's wearing glasses, he's wearing a mask, he's improving himself on ice, as all players do. Cole Caulfield this past week had VR glasses on while he was on the ice. So it's nice to get a glimpse of the players who are relaxing because, it's a long year, physically tough, mentally tough. And to see Kirby Dach on a surfboard in northern Alberta, Kirby grew up northeast of Edmonton, and the family has a lake house up in northern Alberta. And Kirby has said in the past that's the place he goes to relax and to catch up with his family, his parents, his brother and sister. And he looks pretty natural on the surfboard. And water skiing is something he does as well. And apparently he credits his mom Hillary for that she is an avid water skier, and that's something the whole family likes to do.
And some big news for those who are fans of both Xhekaj brothers. It seems like they're going to be doing a meet and greet pretty soon.
Next weekend, Saturday, July 29th, from 2 to 4 p.m. And this is at the, let me just see here, End Zone Bar and Grill in Hamilton. Both Arbor and Florian Xhekaj are going to be there. Meet and greet with their fans. And that was put out on Twitter by their mom, who's pretty active and pretty proud of her boys. So this seems like a fun event for those of you in the Hamilton area next weekend.
So be sure to check out Habs Notepad, Habs headlines, and feature articles throughout the week during this busy off-season at thn.com/Montreal. In roster news, Kaiden Guhle is spending the summer in Montreal, and I can confirm Montreal is a great place to be during the summer. Is there any idea what he's going to be doing here in Montreal, Rick?
This is his first summer in Montreal completely, and he spends till about noon at the rink or the weight room in Brossard. And then his afternoons, the rest of the day is his own. He lives in Griffintown near the canal, and he likes to play golf in the afternoon. But this week he was on TSN 690, and of course everybody's wondering how his recovery. He had not one but two injuries, or re-injured himself this past year, his rookie season. And we're going to play a clip. He had some positive news for Canadiens fans.
Feeling good now, back to 100%, and we're ready to go for camp. So that's always tough to have injuries, and having the first one there and coming back. I think I played maybe 8 to 10 games. I don't even know how many games I played, and then kept going back down with another season-ending injury is tough, and tough on the brain, and kind of mentally, it's more tough than anything. And especially as a young guy, you want to be on the ice as much as you can and playing games and stuff, just kind of learning the game. So
it was tough. It was tough him watching. He was having a good season. He was having an impact. He was becoming a leader on the ice. And yeah, the injuries were tough, both physically and mentally. Although he said the silver lining was that he was able to be in the press box for each game and watch and learn some things. And that he said the game really slows down up there, and you can see how plays unfold. But the best news of that little clip is that he says he's 100% and is going to be ready for camp.
Certainly looking forward to watching him this upcoming season. I think he's got some high expectations, and the fact that he's feeling at 100% is really, really good for him. A young player, you hate to see those guys get big injuries like he just did this past season. But like you said, nice that he's fully recovered now.
Absolutely.
There's a report coming from Radio X, that's CHOIFM, saying that David Reinbacher suffers from Osgood-Schlatter disease. This was a bit of an interesting one. We saw this pop up in the news in various places, and then it just kind of disappeared not too long after. Osgood-Schlatter disease is a swelling and irritation on the growth plate at the top of the shin bone, so you can see where that might affect a hockey player quite a bit with skating. And Rick, what can you tell us here? Because this whole thing unfolded in kind of a bizarre way.
Yeah, and listen carefully and listen right to the end, because this is an important story, if true. But we don't know anything. We don't really know if it's true. We don't really know the whole context, the whole story. But we're going to tell you what we do know. This started, as you said, it was a report on Radio X. It was a reporter from Don Le Calisse, Maxime Truman. And as it turns out, his son has Osgood-Schlatter, and he's a soccer player. He was one of the small minority of athletes who needed surgery. He had a couple of surgeries. But as you said, this is a lesion. I think it's mislabeled a disease. It's a benign condition usually, and it's just pain and swelling that comes as a combination of growing athletes and these growth spurts combined with the overuse of that particular area of the body. And it usually presents as a small bump just below the knee where the tendon kind of connects. It's inflammation, and it's as I said, kind of benign. It's dealt with rest mostly, and most teens, most athletes grow out of this, and as I said, 5 to 10% requires surgery. Now, he brought this forward and said that David Reinbacher was suffering from this condition And the good folks at TVS Sports picked up the phone and contacted the head coach of Cloten in Switzerland. His name is Jeff Tomlinson, and he denied the story. He said, "No, it's not true." Then he went to the team doctor and said that absolutely not. He doesn't have this condition. However, towards the end of the season, and I'll quote, "Towards the end of the season, we noticed a little inflammation in his knees, but it was due to wear and tear. The doctor told us that it was a little inflammation in both knees and nothing serious." And we know that there was David Reinbacher. He missed a couple of games because of a big hit that he took. That was at the end of his season, but just missed a couple of games, and it said he had some knee pain in that. So the next part of this is interesting. That after that was reported, and it was also. There's a former Montreal media, mainstream media personality, let's call him, who has a YouTube show, and he blew this issue up, and I think that after that it just kind of disappeared. It was expunged from the Dans le Calice site. It was taken out of all of their tweets, just completely disappeared. So you had the rumor, the story. Then you had it being denied by the folks in Cloten. The Montreal Canadiens didn't comment on this at all, and then it's completely disappeared. So draw your own conclusions. We're presenting it, and it's something that we don't. I stress to all the folks within Rocket Sports, we don't need to be first. We need to be right. And so we're anxious to present you all the information. It doesn't appear as if this, it isn't a confirmed condition by anyone. And then with Dans le Calice backing away from it so quickly, either there wasn't a grain of truth to it, or they've been pressured to remove that. And we don't know. We don't know, what the case might be. So we thought it was responsible to present it how it happened to you here, and I think this is something that I expect the Canadiens will be asked about this. I expect that David Reinbacher will be asked about this in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. At our last little bit of roster news, there are reports that Michael Pezzetta received some on-ice fighting lessons from Georges Laraque, and that's certainly a guy to learn some fighting from. When Georges Laraque was asked about this, he said for several years now he has been training players to defend themselves or to fight on the ice. He's never really shared anything publicly because he respects players' privacy. And he also mentions that this is not something he's looking to do on a full-time basis given his very busy schedule.
I'm just going to back up a second. And again, this story came out from Dans le Calice. And before you say, "Oh, those guys, what have they ever gotten right?" They got this right. And the way this played out, they reported this that Michael Pezzetta was getting lessons on ice fighting lessons from Georges Laraque. Georges Laraque was asked for comment, and he said, "No, absolutely not. That's absolutely false. That never happened." And Dans le Calice said, "Oh, here's, you want to take a look at the video?" And they posted the video. And following that, George said, "Oh, well, now that Dans le Calice has published the video, I can't really deny it anymore." And then went on to, as you said that it's something he has done quietly over the years. And from the looks of it, it looked like he was getting lessons. Michael Pezzetta, that is, was getting lessons from George on how to grip the opponent's jersey during a fight. That seemed to be what was going on. That was happening at Brassard. It was during, they were on one corner of the ice while there were some youngsters on the ice playing and whatnot. And there's this video. So I thought it was interesting, the response from George Laraque. I mean, he's played a little fast and loose with the truth in the past. He denied, and then when presented with the evidence said, oh, yeah, I guess it did happen.
Nothing wrong with Michael Pezzetta reaching out to get some fighting lessons from him. I think that's it's an important thing to try and learn before you go out and take on that type of a role. Sometimes you see it with rookies approaching one of the veterans after a practice or a skate and seeing, okay, how do I grip this? What do I do with the jersey? That sort of thing. So nice to see that Michael Pezzetta has reached out to a longtime hockey player for help on that.
And I'll just add one thing, because I think you're right. It is important. And George Laraque in his tweet says, and I'll quote, "Even though Michael isn't the biggest player, he plays big. He's not afraid and will defend his teammates to death." And I think that's absolutely true. And that's one of the reasons that Michael Pezzetta got the contract that he did. And I think the contrast is interesting, because Michael Pezzetta isn't the size of a George Laraque. George Laraque was a heavyweight enforcer, and George Laraque would not, at least when he was with the Montreal Canadiens, would not defend his teammates to the death. He picked and chose his fights very carefully, and sometimes it was other players who had Tom Kostopoulos would get in the way, or Ryan O'Byrne, or others that would have to step up because of George Laraque's code. So I think he makes an important distinction here about Michael Pezzetta, and we respect Michael Pezzetta for always having the best interests of his teammates at heart. Absolutely.
And now is a good time to get to our prospect report.
This edition of the Rocket Report is brought to you by AHL.Report, your premier source for the Laval Rocket, the AHL affiliate of the Montreal Canadiens. AHL.Report is a proud member of the Rocket Sports Media Network.
The Laval Rocket have made yet another signing as they signed defenseman Christopher Morizier-Ortiz to a one-year, two-way AHL contract. This player spent last season within the Penguins organization with the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins and the Wheeling Nailers of the ECHL. He spent the majority of the time in the ECHL, though.
That's right. Over his career, he's an undrafted player. He has 23 games in the AHL, 98 games in the ECHL. So you expect that a player like this is going to start with the Trois-Rivières Lions and will be there as an injury replacement as the season goes on. If necessary. He's played in the queue with Baie-Comeau mostly, and so the Canadian scouts are familiar with him.
The Canadiens prospects will participate in a rookie tournament from September 15th to 18th in Buffalo, New York. They'll be playing games against the Sabres, the Bruins, and the Senators prospects. This is a tournament that I always look forward to watching. The streaming quality is a little bit hit and miss, but nonetheless, it is fun to watch this and see how the different teams' prospects level up against each other.
So as I mentioned from the outset, rookie camp is 7.5 weeks away, starting on September 13th in Brossard. They'll have the medical testing and whatnot at the beginning, then a day of practice, and then they'll head to Buffalo. This is actually a 6-team tournament with the Canadiens, with the host Buffalo, Boston Bruins, New Jersey Devils, Ottawa Senators, Pittsburgh Penguins. But as you said, the Canadiens will only play 3 of those teams, 3 games, the Sabres, Bruins, and Senators. And that team will be, and that camp will be directed by Laval head coach J.F. Houle.
The Athletic put out a ranking of their top 50 drafted NHL prospects. You'll see a few Canadians on this list. David Reinbacher comes in at number 20. Lane Hudson comes in at 27. Owen Beck, Sean Farrell, Philippe Michard, and Joshua Waugh all got honorable mentions.
So top 50 drafted prospects. What does that mean? Well, it's Scott Wheeler's list. And he has a criteria about being not a full-time NHL player, being under 23 years old. So that's going to eliminate some of the Canadiens' prospects. And as you look through the list, it's made up of players from the 2023 draft, 2022 draft, 2021 draft, and 5 players from the 2020 draft. I think this is a good news, bad news situation. We know that this was an extremely strong draft that just happened in 2023. And you look at Chicago Blackhawks. They have 5 prospects on this list. The Blue Jackets have 4, as you said. The Canadiens have 2. The 2023 draft prospects dominate this list. The top 5 prospects are all from the 2023 draft. Number 1, Connor Bedard. Number 2, Matvei Michkov. Number 3, Adam Fantilli. Number 4, Leo Carlson. Number 5, Will Smith. And number 6, if we just go one more, from last year's draft, that's Logan Cooley, who I think we both very much liked in last year's draft. So I said good news, bad news for the Canadiens with the number of picks the number of prospects they have and the prospect pool they have. You don't like to see David Reinbacher at number 20. Scott Wheeler says he'll become a good NHLer, not necessarily elite. The great news is that Lane Hutson is ranked so highly, and that's based on his freshman year at Boston University, and that he's unlike many other players in the draft. The way he can dominate on the offensive side, the way he can move, the way he's shifty. And does so, makes plays in a calm way. Just one of the, as Scott Wheeler said, one of the most clever players in this grouping. And Wheeler expects him to be a dominant offensive defenseman, I'm quoting now, and a power play 1 quarterback. So I think that's great news for Lane Hutson. I don't think it's going to help the folks who are upset by the Canadiens passing on Matvei Michkov. And of course, this is his opinion, and we're going to have to see how this all plays out.
So you can find all our content about Canadiens prospects at thn.com/Montreal. For our quotes of the week, the NHL put out their Welcome to the NHL 2023 Draft. This premiered on Friday, featuring Connor Bedard, Adam Fantilli, Will Smith, Oliver Moore, Oliver Bonk, Carey Terrence, and Jacob Fowler, who was drafted by the Montreal Canadiens. This was a really awesome video to tune into and watch. It really gives you an inside perspective of what it's like to go to the NHL Draft, especially from the perspective of those families of the prospects being drafted. And we have 3 different quotes coming from Jacob Fowler. And the first one here, Jacob Fowler is just going to introduce himself.
I'm Jacob Fowler. I'm 18 years old. I'm a goaltender from the Youngstown Phantoms. Can't even describe how excited I am. My game's pretty simple. I think I'm super structured in the way I play. I don't like to be out of position. I don't like to be kind of sprawling around on my back too much.
He's a technical goaltender. We told you that before. You hear that his words are accompanied by music. Yes, this was from the quotes are taken from the video. Welcome to the NHL 2023 Draft. And yes, I highly recommend this. I know personally when we go to the draft, for me, in addition to seeing how who the Canadiens pick and all the different players and staff from the NHL teams at the draft, my favorite part is the families, and we've often sat with the families and talked with the families. Remember having long talks with Travis Konechny's family and how excited they were. And this video gives you, as you said, kind of a behind-the-scenes insight into how the families are feeling, how the prospects are feeling. They certainly picked the right ones with a lot of the prospects at the top of the draft, but then lucked out with Jacob Fowler picking a goaltender and having his comments. One of my favorite parts was there was fans came up to Radek Bonk and Oliver Bonk. Radek Bonk being the NHLer, Oliver Bonk taken by the Flyers. Fans came up and asked Radek Bonk, "Can we have an autograph?" And being a former NHLer, he's sure. And he's getting ready to get his pen out, and they bypass him and go right to his son, Oliver, the prospect. So I thought that was fabulous. But back to Jacob Fowler, as we've said before, he's a quote machine. He's very personable. His family is as well. And it was a real treat seeing them in the behind-the-scenes look.
Yeah, and our next quote from Jacob Fowler, it's talking about his outlook on draft day.
To me, it's not a matter of how early or how late. It's when your name gets called, just enjoying it and soaking it all in, because you only get drafted once.
You only get drafted once, so don't focus on what number you were or who selected you. Just enjoy the moment. You've worked hard for this, and I think that he obviously prepared well for this draft event.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, that's got to be such a great moment for a young player and his family. Our final quote from Jacob Fowler, he's talking about his reaction being selected by the Canadiens and what his family reacted to as well.
Next order of selection is the Montreal Canadiens.
Montreal Canadiens are proud to select from Youngstown, Jacob Fowler.
Oh, yeah. I knew it. Oh, my God.
Welcome. Thank you.
Pleasure to have you.
Congrats. Welcome. Thank you so much.
Congratulations. You got a lot of family up there?
Yeah, let's just say they're pretty ecstatic right now that I'm going back up there. My grandfather, he passed last year, and his wife, she's French-Canadian, and I learned a lot about the city. I've been there a bunch of times, and looking forward to spending a lot more time up there. What a jersey this is, huh? Oh, man.
I've been shown the picture of Jacob as a baby with his Canadiens mini stick. It was his security item that he carried around, and it's just so amazing that he's come full circle.
My dad, even though he was a hockey fan, he would wear a Montreal Canadiens t-shirt, and to have it come around to Montreal, it just means so much.
I think there's a lot of pressure that comes with playing for the Canadiens. In a market like that with such a historic franchise, they're so passionate. They want to win so bad. I want to make my mark on Montreal and be a part of this franchise to get where they want to be.
Very mature. He knows what to expect, and he's ready for it. He embraces it. And we've told you before that the family has connections to Montreal, that the grandfather, who passed last year, unfortunately, was married to a Quebec lady, and so they would make frequent trips to Montreal. And Jacob explained that he was emotional. The dad, Jay Fowler, he was very emotional, and he heard the mom Carrie talk about the mini stick with the Canadiens mini stick that Jacob had, and all of them just were so excited and so happy that he was picked by the Canadiens.
Yeah, you can hear him getting very emotional about that whole situation. Very raw kind of a guy as well. So I'm looking forward to having him within this organization. And honestly, what a great moment for him and the family. So if you haven't checked out this video, definitely head over and watch that full thing. You will not regret it.
Absolutely.
Ending things off, we have some hockey news and notes from around the league. Starting here, the NHL presented their Stanley Awards this week, recognizing the front office achievements, and the Montreal Canadiens were named Social Media Club of the Year. So that means they're recognizing the overall excellence of the club's social media team, including maximizing the team's official social media channels to engage existing fans and capture the attention of new fans and with outstanding creativity and proven instinct to innovate within the NHL. And Rick, I've watched the Montreal Canadiens social media for a while. Congrats to them for winning this award. I don't know that description really fits what they do with their social media.
Yeah, and we've offered constructive criticism over the last year or so. I think maybe where they excel, maybe where they stand out is the way they use Twitch, and they use it often, and they use it effectively, and they bring Canadiens players to that platform. It's not something that all people use. It's something very a niche market of fans. But I would say they do it well. On the more popular social media platforms, whether it be Twitter, especially Facebook, Instagram, I don't think they really necessarily measure up.
Yeah, and that's a fair point, too. I do think what they've been able to put onto Twitch is really cool with their live streams and whatnot. But also, like you said, on a lot of the mainstream socials, I don't know that they really measure up compared to a lot of other NHL teams.
Yeah.
The Athletic put out an article entitled "Which Teams Have Improved the Most This Offseason?" Coming at number 1, you see the Dallas Stars. Number 2, the Red Wings, who acquired DeBrincat. Number 32, it's the Boston Bruins, so that's kind of nice to see there. Yeah. But Montreal, they come in at number 9. Notable moves this offseason for Montreal, adding in Alex Newhook and then subtracting Joel Edmondson and Jonathan Drouin.
Interesting that, the fans must be saying, wait a minute, Canadiens didn't do a whole lot in the offseason. They were more or less absent from the free agent frenzy, but they come in the top 10 in most improved. And it's interesting. This is done by the Athletic every year. Dom Lucian, he has a model that he uses to make the calculations, and I'm going to get his net rating model that he uses. So this is simply plugging in the players and spitting out a number, and what you get out is the goal differentials from one year to the next. And the Canadiens, does the model treat Alex Newhook favorably? No, actually, it doesn't. From the article, it says the Canadiens paid a premium for Newhook. They sure did, and the model isn't quite sold on him yet. So where's the gains come from? Well, the gains come from the deletions. Jonathan Drouin and Joel Edmondson, as you said, and particularly with the deletion of Joel Edmondson, it says that Joel Edmondson was once a defensive beast for the Canadiens, but those days are long gone, and the Canadiens are much better with him out of their lineup. And we can add that he had last year played 61 games, some injury problems for the remainder of the games. Joel Edmondson had a team worst goal differential, a plus minus of minus 29. If you look at turnovers, he created 12 turnovers and gave up 71 turnovers. So, addition by subtraction is the way this model has got the Canadiens up in the top 10.
Yeah, and I think we also have to note that the offseason is far from over at this point. We're still waiting on a Tarasenko contract. I'm sure that will change things drastically. And beyond Tarasenko, I don't know that there was really a big fish in the free agency pool. So not a ton of big moves for any of the teams. And those who did make some moves, I think it really helped them out quite a bit. The Toronto Maple Leafs have hired Guy Boucher as their assistant coach. He'll be running the power play. We'll see what he can do in this position. His last stint as an NHL coach was with Ottawa. Started off great and ended terribly. Same thing in his other position as a coach in the NHL with Tampa Bay. Started off great, ended horribly. I don't know if this is going to guarantee that the Toronto Maple Leafs lose in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Final and then implode the following season. We'll see what he can do. To me, this is kind of interesting that they're bringing in someone that's very experienced, especially as a head coach, behind Sheldon Keefe. I wonder if there's going to be a plan for Guy Boucher to potentially be that predecessor, but I don't want to speculate too much on that.
Yeah, there's listen, I'm sure in our audience, there are backers of Guy Boucher. There are those fans in Quebec who really appreciate what he did. There's other who are detractors, and it's been a while since he's positively affected an NHL team. And in this case, there was a vacancy because Spencer Carberry, a former assistant in Toronto, went to Washington. So I think kind of big shoes to fill, and we'll see if he makes an improvement or makes a mess, and we'll be quite fine with the latter. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. In terms of a good assistant coach hiring, the Washington Capitals have hired Kirk Muller to be an assistant there. Former Montreal star. I kind of like this for Washington.
Yeah, I like it too. As I said, Washington is going with a new head coach, so having some experience, some NHL coaching experience behind the bench, and Kirk Muller. The interesting part of this is that Kirk Muller was one of the few who was able to write a playbook to shut down Alex Ovechkin, and we saw that happen very effectively in the Canadiens' playoff run. And so the Capitals kind of smart, not wanting anyone else to have that knowledge, bring him into the Capitals.
Yeah, absolutely. Last week we were talking about the Alex Galchenyuk saga in Arizona, having presses charged against him, having his contract terminated. Galchenyuk did release an apology, and I'm hoping that after all this craziness, this whole thing just comes to an end.
Yeah, it's just, as we said last week, it's not something we really want to dwell on. I think that Alex Galchenyuk did the right thing. He issued 2 apologies, one essentially to the police force, whom he was very abusive towards, and another to the Arizona Coyotes, who terminated his contract, and their fans. Whether that's enough, I mean, some very, very disturbing things were said. Whether that apology is enough, it's a good first step, but I think this is a very difficult situation. NHLPA is getting involved, but the other part of that is that he's going to take part in the NHLPA assistance program. So I think that is a second good step for him.
Former Montreal Canadiens forward Nate Thompson has announced his retirement. He spent parts of 2 seasons here in Montreal. Bit of a journeyman, though. Bottom 6 forward, seemed like someone that was always very well liked by his teammates and a lot of the media. So congratulations to him on a long 15-year NHL career.
On his Twitter, Nate says, "From the time I was 4 until age 38, hockey has been my life and my best friend. I am beyond grateful and thankful for all the great people I've met and friendships I've made. All good things must come to an end, so thank you to all who supported me along this journey." Nate was a great guy, a great teammate. A season and a half for the Canadiens, played 88 games, and he finishes his career with 844 games played in the NHL.
So on that note, we'll take our first break here on the Canadiens Connection podcast. Coming up, we'll hear from our sponsors, DraftKings, and then during our big topic segment, we have an exclusive interview with Marty Biron. Stay with us. This is the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio.
New customers, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. Bet just $5 to score $150 in bonus bets instantly. That's code THPN. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Massachusetts, call 800-327-5050 or visit gamblinghelplinema.org. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Kansas, call 1-800-522-4700. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, KS. In West Virginia, gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. All games regulated by the West Virginia Lottery. Please play responsibly. In partnership with Hollywood Casinos at Charlestown Races. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 21 and over in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. 1 boost per eligible game. Opt-in required. Max bet $50. 10-plus leg requisite for 100% boost. Eligibility, wagering, and deposit restrictions apply. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/baseball terms.
Welcome back to the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio. I'm Michael Spinella. You can find me on Twitter at the Spinella. With me in the studio is our president and founder of Rocket Sports, Rick Stevens. You can find him on Twitter at Rocket Sports. You can also follow at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And you can hit that subscribe button in your favorite podcasting app so that you never miss a single episode. If you have missed any episodes, you can check out the website canadiensconnection.fm. And this is going to be a really awesome big topic segment. As I said, Marty Biron is going to hop into the studio relatively soon for an exclusive interview, and he's going to talk about goaltending. The Montreal Canadiens are currently in a rebuild. Jeff Gordon and Kent Hughes have promised to improve and modernize each part of the organization, and that includes goaltending. Goaltending at one point in Montreal was a strength, but I think we're past those days, and no real predecessor to Carey Price in sight. Marty Biron is a former NHL goaltender, now an analyst with TSN, RDS, and MSG. And he's going to join the Canadiens Connection podcast to discuss what Montreal has in terms of goaltending and outline the path to returning the key piece of the team to its former glory. And Rick, are you excited to have Marty in the studio?
Absolutely. We're very fortunate to have him. He's been on Rocket Sports Podcast before. We're happy to have him back again, and this is a really important area. As you said, this revamping of the entire organization has to include goaltending, especially if you have such a rich history of goaltending that the Montreal Canadiens have. And we've seen Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon, they've focused on improving development, on building out their analytics department, and most recently with respect to the medical staff. We've heard them say that there isn't an heir apparent to the number one in-house, and so this is an area. So when we talk to Marty, we're going to be sure to ask him about a blueprint for creating a positive goaltending department, and ask him to take a look at the current situation, especially in Montreal with 3 NHL contracts: Jake Allen, Sam Montembeault, and Cayden Primeau.
And without any further ado, let's welcome Marty Biron to the studio.
This week, Rick, it is my great pleasure to welcome back to the show. It's been a little bit since we've had a chance to catch up to him, with him, and I'm certainly anxious for our conversation with him today. And it's none other than former NHL goaltender Marty Biron, Buffalo Sabres studio analyst for MSG, also a TSN analyst. Got lots of great insight from him this year on free agency frenzy, of course. And we're very happy to have him back here on the show today. Marty, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, free agency was kind of boring to a certain extent because look, I think the GMs got a little smart and they didn't spend all the crazy money that we've seen in the past year. So I just sat in the back desk with Gino Retta and Jimmy McLennan, and I had a lot of snacks with me, so that worked out really good.
All right.
That sounds like a good way to spend the day, quite frankly.
Well, yeah, and then after that, everybody heads out to the cottage.
That's right.
It's Canada Day, so so that was. I got my snacks in the day, and then I was able to enjoy the rest of the day with my family. That was great.
Well, some of our listeners are probably listening to this podcast at the cottage, and they probably have snacks and maybe a beverage, and they want to hear from you all about, we're here talking about the Montreal Canadiens. The Montreal Canadiens obviously in a rebuild. They're going through and revamping every aspect of the organization. But here we're going to talk about goaltending. And it just kind of struck me that, if we're looking for a blueprint on how to build a goaltending unit that will compete regularly in the Stanley Cup, I thought, okay, let's look at, the last on-ice action we saw, the Stanley Cup final. And what did we learn from that? We have two kind of very clash of styles, clash of pay scales, Sergei Bobrovsky and Adin Hill. I wonder if you can just contrast what we saw in the Cup final, and is there anything we can learn from that?
Well, there's definitely things that we can learn, but I want to say let's be careful not to have these strong conclusions with wrong facts or ideas. Like the whole narrative that Adin Hill was Vegas's fifth goalie at the start of the season is wrong. He was not. He was the backup goaltender, but a very well-paid backup at over $2 million a year. So this is not a guy that's making $750,000 league minimum that doesn't have a lot of experience. He was a very capable NHL goaltender. So I hate the whole story like Adin Hill was the fifth goaltender. No, he was not. Was Adin Hill the preferred goalie for the Vegas Golden Knights? If you'd started the season and said, hey, we're going to be in the finals and who's going to be our goalie, I think they probably would have liked to have Logan Thompson and Laurent Brossoit, because those were the two guys for most of the season. But Adin Hill did really good when he played. And obviously we can talk about his physical abilities and what he brings to the ice. But he was a good goaltender. And Sergei Bobrovsky on the other end, people are going to say, well, it's not Bobrovsky that got the Florida Panthers in the playoffs. It's Alex Lyon. And yeah, okay, I totally get that. But without Bobrovsky, Florida doesn't, get by the first round. They don't get by the Toronto series. He was a key factor in their success. So yeah, maybe he didn't have the best of regular seasons, and maybe it's been a pattern for him the last, little bit here, especially in Florida. But he's still a quality goaltender that can all of a sudden turn hot, and that's what we saw in the playoffs.
So maybe it boils down to this question, and that is, do you need a top-tier goaltender to win a Stanley Cup?
I believe you do. And I really looked at, not only my own preference, my eye test, and saying, look, I want a Vasilevsky, I want a Shesterkin, I want UC Saros, I want a guy like that in net to win the Stanley Cup. Now, there's a lot of other factors, right? I mean, your team defense, how do you surround your goaltender? How do you play your defensive zone structure and all of that? It plays a factor. But in the last 6 years, so let's take the 12 goaltenders that made it to the Stanley Cup Finals in the last 6 years.
All right.
Only 5 of the 12, and the 2 of them this year with Hill and Bobrovsky. So if you take this year out, only 3 of the 10 goaltenders prior to this season were outside of the top 20 in goals save above expectation per game in the NHL in the regular season. And those 3 goaltenders were Carey Price, who was 21st that year. And you could say, well, you know what? Carey Price is a better than top 20 goaltender in every given year. It was Tuukka Rask and Braden Holtby. Everybody else was inside the top 20 in goals save above expectation per game. So they all had fantastic season, and they all deserve to be there. So for me, the whole narrative of, you don't need a really good goaltender, you can get by with just average, it doesn't really work that way. Even Darcy Kemper, who last a year ago went, to the finals and won the cup with Washington, not with Washington, against Tampa Bay, but Darcy Kemper with Colorado, before going over to Washington, he struggled in the playoffs, but in the regular season, he was 7th in goal save above expectations. Like, he was a top 10 goaltender. So for me, you need a top tiered goaltender to win. If not, you're really rolling the dice and hoping for a chance there.
So let me kind of jump in here and continue that, looking at Vegas and Florida from the Stanley Cup final. The other two things in the goaltending department that the two of them have in common is that they have a department dedicated to goaltending. They've got Sean Burke as the director of goaltending in Vegas. Roberto Luongo has a similar position and a similar kind of department that he's forming in Florida as well. We know that Sean Burke, prior to taking his position with Vegas, essentially held the same position with Montreal when Marc Bergevin hired him a couple of years ago with the intent of starting kind of a goaltending department. When Kent Hughes came in, he pretty efficiently dismantled that, and they haven't gotten back to that yet. So has the goaltending position and the technicality of it and just how much skill is required at this level to be a contender in the Stanley Cup's playoffs, is it big enough that it does really need its own department within NHL franchises with multiple people and staff members, a director, on-ice personnel, and so on and so forth?
I believe it does. I believe you need to have a department that not only looks at your two goaltenders in the NHL and your two goaltenders in the American League, and even possibly your two goaltenders in the East Coast Hockey League, but your college draft players, your Canadian juniors draft players, your European goaltenders that are playing over there. Because the biggest thing for me is that trades and free agency does not equal success when you trade for big name goaltenders usually, or you sign a goaltender in the free agent market. All these success stories, right? And I talked about the Saros, the Vasilevsky, the Shesterkin, the Price, the Tuukka Rask, even Braden Holtby with the Washington Capitals. They were all developed in-house. They were all drafted, developed, and it's hard for the goalie coach. Let's see, the Montreal Canadiens' goalie coach is on the ice working with two goaltenders, doing pre-scouts and everything else. How do you spend time then making sure that the development is being done correctly, that the right things and the right steps are being done with your prospects? Because eventually those are the guys that will come on and will be able to fulfill the need that you have in net, more than trading or signing a free agent. So I don't think that the goalie coach can do that. I don't think that the American goalie coach should do that because they have a job to do. Sometimes you have a goalie development coach, but who really sets the message? Who oversees the whole thing? Because from my experience, what I think happened in Montreal, and it's happened in a lot of different organizations, is that one person says, we have to do it one way. Another person says we have to do it a different way. Another person says we have to do it a different way. And they're all independent contractors, right? In some sense. You need somebody like a Sean Burke in Vegas or like a Roberto Luongo, or really it's Francois Allaire that's also a part of the Florida Panthers goalie department, that somebody up top has to give a direction. And then when everybody's going the same direction, you can really build on that. So development is huge. It's huge to sustain success over the years. And I believe that every team should have that goalie department laid out in the way that it needs to be laid out. Like somebody can try it and it's not going to work. And they're going to say, well, that didn't work. Okay, did you do it the right way? There's a right way and a wrong way. I believe the right way really will help teams, continue to develop goaltenders.
You've mentioned Carey Price's name a couple of times already. Setting aside, of course, LTIR restrictions established within the CBA, so maybe this is a question of now versus later, but in talking about creating and establishing a department of goaltending in Montreal, how do you see maybe Carey Price fitting into that kind of a role, either now or down the road?
Well, it's interesting because, number one, I don't know if Carey Price wants to do this. I know that he's been involved with many different goalie websites and goalie coaches for the last few years, explaining why he does certain drills and why he was doing certain things the way that he did it. So maybe he has a desire, but I will say this. Most people that get into goalie coaching or goalie schools or goalie development, they realize quickly that's a lot of work. So do you want to put in the work, right? do you, like Kerry's got a young family. He probably wants to spend time with his kids and enjoy that. And a lot of times when you're 10 years removed from the game and you try to come back in the game, it's a little bit more difficult. But maybe because he's Carey Price and he has obviously the name and recognition and all of that, maybe he can do it. So I don't know if Carey wants to do it. I think he'd be pretty good at it because his attention to details over the last many, many years that I've watched him. I remember going to Hamilton when he played with the Bulldogs. My brother was on that team when they won the Calder Cup, and I would go in the playoffs and watch him in practice and watch him in game. And he was just out of the juniors, right? And he came in for the end of the season in the playoffs. And I'm like, this guy, he has the details down. He knows exactly what he's doing. And he was a student at the game and always was. So, he could probably do it and do it well. It's just a matter of, well, does he have the time and desire to do it? But I could see teams calling and saying, hey, if it's not the Canadiens, when your contract runs out, because we know that he wouldn't be able to work with another team right now, but when your contract runs out, do you want to do it? And maybe he does.
So, thinking about goaltenders and their characteristics, I want to ask you: does size matter? That sensitive question. And you have a guy like Kevin Woodley with In Goal saying there's a sweet spot for goaltenders, kind of 6'3", 215, 220. And some organizations, and we've heard this about the Canadiens, they don't like to draft any goaltender below 6'2" or thereabouts. And we've seen, you talked about Adin Hill. He's kind of a shot blocker style, big goaltender. He gets in the way of a lot of pucks. And even young goaltenders coming up, Yaroslav Askarov at 6'4", Jesper Wallstedt, 6'3". But on the other hand, you're very familiar with a goaltender who's not of that size. Devin Levi is 6 foot or barely that. Yep. Dustin Wolf, one of the best goaltenders in the AHL, in and around the same size. What is there something to this goaltender and size question?
It's part of the criterias, right? Like size is always something that you have to consider. But there's many other factors, right? Like I really like Jeremy Swayman as a goaltender. He's 6'2". So when you put the size and you say, well, 6'2", okay, but what else does he do? Is he a very athletic goaltender? Does he have incredible leg strength, core strength, flexibility, athleticism? How does he play the depth, right? Like some smaller goaltenders can't play deep, but do you have good reaction times? And so it's part of the one of the criteria. Size is. I look at length more than actual weight. Like for me, a goalie that's 225 or a goalie that's 195, it doesn't really matter, right? Because I think with equipment, you can look bigger. I mean, I played the game. I was 170 pounds and I had regular sized equipment and legal sized equipment, but I could look as big as a 220, 225 goaltender in that because of the way that you wear your gear. And so there's some of that. But when you get to be smaller than 6'3", 6'2", 6'3", then you need to excel at something. UC Saros is a small goaltender, but he's extremely fast. He excels at lateral speed. He excels at reaction time. He excels at athleticism. So he's overcoming the size issue by excelling at something else. Devin Levi is very similar. I think of Levi as very much like Jussi Saros. He excels at speed. He excels at athleticism. So then the size doesn't become a problem or a factor. But there is 6'1", 6'2" goaltenders that don't excel, and then they're a little bit behind, right? And they maybe are good in juniors or college and maybe even good at the American League, but at the NHL you struggle. So when I played, 6', 6'1" was like the sweet spot. And then it got to about 6'2", right? Like towards the end of my career, you're like, okay, 6'2" is a good height. I think we're getting more to the 6'3", 6'3.5" now, but I don't think it's going to continue to get taller and taller, because I think when you get to 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", again, you have to have something to excel at to compensate for sometimes being tall and lanky and full of holes. So that to me is why size, I look at it, but it's not a determining factor. In the end, it's one of the factors, but not the factor.
So now we turn to the current situation for the Montreal Canadiens and going into the fall. So far, without any moves over the summer, we have Jake Allen and Sam Montembeault as the tandem going in, and I think Amy will add another goaltender in a minute. But just focusing on Allen and Montembeault. Jake Allen is he's under a new contract, gets a bit of a bump in his salary this season. Sam Montembeault had probably his best season last year. The numbers were kind of iffy, but you've talked about the goals saved above expectation, and there he excelled. He was, I think, top 15 in the NHL. So how do you see those two goaltenders managing workload and working in this situation where wins aren't necessarily a priority yet? It's all about the development of the younger players, but how can they be the last line of defense for the upcoming season?
Well, again, I look at other factors when I try to evaluate goaltenders and where they're going to be. And the development curve is big for me. Like, are you continuing to develop, or are you starting to plateau? And you look at Samuel Montembeault, and over the last 3 years, I really feel that his development curve keeps going up. Like, he keeps getting better, and he keeps getting more comfortable, and he keeps adjusting his game. Last season, he made some big adjustment in the way that he played the game. He stayed a little deeper. He's a 6'3" goaltender, right? Like, he's not big, but he still has length. And using that length to his advantage, well, he played a little deeper, and it fit the style that I think he has to play with. So for me, Sam Montembeault is still developing, but he's getting to that level now where the Canadiens should say, we have to test him as our number one goaltender. We have to give him the ball and see where it goes. Because with Jake Allen, what you're getting is a veteran backup, in my opinion. A good 1B, right? But Who's going to be your guy? Who's going to be the guy that you can build for the future? And again, when it comes to development, and I know Cayden Primeau a little bit. I mean, obviously, I know his dad, Keith, and I remember being told when Cayden was 14 years old and 13 years old, like, he's going to be good, and he's extremely good. But I feel like his development has plateaued. It has plateaued over the last 2 years. It has not continued up the graphic, right? The line has not continued up. It has plateaued. So if there's one guy with the Canadian right now that you should focus on, and you should see some optimism for the future, is Montembeault. And after the World Championship last year, the season that he had, to me, this is the guy you have to build around and see if it's going to work. And you can't do that for the next 2-3 years because you may pass your time with him, but you have to look at now and see if it's going to work, and make a decision by this season then.
It's interesting what the comment that you just made about Cayden Primeau, because as soon as you began to talk about examining a goaltender's development curve, I underlined Cayden's name on my notes, because what you said is exactly that. It's Cayden Primeau has done decently well for himself in the AHL when he's had a strong defense in front of him, but it's that transition to the NHL that has really been his big obstacle that he can't seem to master and find success at. You look at other goaltenders that are kind of at the same age and situation as him as having some good success in the AHL and transitioning maybe successfully, like an Akira Schmid for New Jersey and that type of thing. So, I guess this is kind of a two-part question for you. First of all, as far as Cayden Primeau goes, and what are you seeing as his hiccups in terms of that transition to the NHL game, coupled with in terms of the goaltending depth for the Canadiens this year? This is the first year that Primeau will be waiver eligible. Do you think that is going to be a concern for Montreal? Could he get claimed? And even if he does, is it something they should be worried about?
No, I don't think they should be worried about it. I got my NHL goalie depth chart right now, and I mean, it's full. It's full. Like, I can't fit another goalie anywhere on this list, right? And that's why you see guys like Thomas Greiss retiring, because he's like, well, I mean, there's no more chairs. The musical chair game, actually, we added multiple chairs because a lot of teams are saying, well, we're going to use 3 goalies this year. We may use 4, and we may use 5. Like, we've seen the Ottawa Senators use 8 last year or whatever it was. That's not something a team wants to do, but there's no more chairs in that game of musical chairs. So I don't think the Canadiens are worried that they would lose Cayden Primeau if they had to put him on waivers to send him to Laval. And when it comes to Cayden Primeau, maybe it's not his fault. Like, it's very hard when you have development years, your first, second, third season pro hockey as a goaltender, especially as a goaltender, you need to play. You need to be able to play and play a lot of games. Well, in his second year, where he was supposed to take a step forward, was the 2020-2021 season that obviously was the pandemic year. And he only played a dozen and a half games in the American League that year. His first year pro got stopped because of the COVID pandemic. So his first 2 years pro were very much affected by the pandemic. And it affected more goaltenders than it affected players. And so, unfortunately for Cayden Primeau, that's what happened. But I also think that I watched Cayden Primeau play, and I think that there's big deficiencies in his game. I don't think he's got the NHL speed. So maybe he's had good success at the AHL level, but then he gets to the NHL, and I think the speed is very, very evident that it's lacking. And I think he lacks athleticism too. Now, people are going to say, oh, he's made some very athletic saves where he dives around or whatever. That's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about body control. I'm talking about being able to explode one way, and then all of a sudden you have to plant an edge, you have to have body control, and you explode the other way. Like, I feel like so many times we see Cayden Primeau where he pushes one direction, and if the play's there, he's going to be in the right position. But if the play moves to another location, it takes a while for him to get there. So that's where the speed and the athleticism of goaltending is important, and I think he's behind in these two fronts.
So you mentioned, and first I want to say that we really appreciate your time, and this has been some great insight. But I have one more question for you, and you mentioned your goalie book, and I want to get you to get your goalie book out and tell us about a goalie who's playing junior A hockey in Kempville, and and his and the way he is similar or maybe different from the way his dad played goal.
He's very much different. So, yeah, my son Jacob, who was it's funny enough. You talk about and this is a message, a PSA, public safety announcement to parents that think that their kids need to be playing AAA at 9 or 10 or go to the brick tournament. And if they don't go to the brick tournament, they're not going to make the NHL. They're not going to play college. They're not going to play junior hockey. My son played goalie in his early years. And then when he was 11, he came to me right before the season. He goes, "Dad, I want to be a player this year." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And then he's going to be his first Pee Wee year, like Pee Wee minor year. I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Yeah, I want to be a player." So he played like house and like select, right? Like, because he was a player. And then Pee Wee major, he's like, "I'm going to be a goalie again." And I'm like, "Well, how can you be a goalie again now?" So he played again house and select as a Pee Wee major when all the kids his age that, and all the parents are like, oh, we have to be on the AAA team because we want to be going to the Quebec Pee Wee tournament and all of that. He was coming off of a year as a player, a year of house, and then his Bantam minor year, he was playing like AA hockey. And I remember we used to get our butt whipped all over the place when we would go into Ontario or go to Detroit or whatever. But he kept developing, and he kept having a goal in front of him, and he kept saying, I want to play college hockey, right? And it wasn't, I want to be Division I. It was, I want to play college hockey. I don't care where it is and what it is. So he continued to push. He continued to get better. And really the year that he was as a player helped him because he worked on skating and edge work, and then he became a really good puck handling goaltender. I thought I was pretty good at handling the puck, and I made a lot of mistakes, but he's really good at handling the puck. He's got size. He's got length. He's a hockey nerd like I was. So he's doing really well. And last year, he took a chance, and really the Kempville 73s took a big chance on him. And he got to play a lot of games and had a really good season. And he's going back this year, and he's excited for it. But, yeah, I keep telling parents, like, my son didn't make it to the New York State camp, right? He did the regional camp, and then he didn't get called back to the New York State USA Hockey Camp, or he didn't make the national camp. And it was always like a list of I don't want to call them failure, but challenges. Mm-hmm. He always had big challenges in front of him. And he always got up the next day and worked hard. And that is one of the life lessons he's going to learn through hockey, is because he didn't have it easy, but he also could appreciate every step of the way. And now he's definitely enjoying junior hay hockey in the CCHL, traveling to, Pembroke and Cornwall and and Brockville and Ottawa and all of it. And he's really enjoying it. It's great. Thanks for asking. It's a lot of fun. And I get to go and travel and see him once in a while because it's only like 5 hours, 6 hours away drive from Buffalo. So I'll go up one of these days and catch a game and drive back, and I get to enjoy that too.
Well, that's a great story and great advice as well.
Absolutely. Congratulations to him and to you. I'm sure it's fun being a proud hockey dad as well.
Well, it's fun being a proud hockey dad. I wasn't a crazy hockey dad. I kind of sat in the corner and did my thing. But you ask how he was different than I was. He's quicker. He's more athletic. He skates better. He plays the puck better. He's got more fire in him. I was a very mellow goaltender and just was like, whatever. I gave up 5 today. No worries. I'll stop him all tomorrow, right? He's got his mom's fire in him, and it boils up sometimes. So
we're going to see some fun. Goalie fights, or
I don't know. He may want to get into 1 or 2, and I told him be careful because we think we're tough, and I found out the hard way by trying to be tough against Ray Emery, and Ray kind of put me down like I was not even worthy of being in the same fight with him. So,
Matt Cook, wasn't there
very careful.
Wasn't there an incident with Matt Cook?
Yeah, Matt Cook too. Yeah, Matt Cook and we went way back to our days in the American League. He played in Syracuse, and I was in Rochester, and we used to play 12 times against one another. And then he was in Vancouver one year, and I was with Buffalo. And we were down 6-1. I still remember second period in Vancouver. And I decided to go after him in the corner. But listen, I had Rob Ray. I had all these tough guys on my team. I was able to act tough because I had all this backup.
That's right.
That's great.
Well, not only did we get great current modern NHL goaltending insight today, we got some great stories from Marty Biron too. That's a gold win for us.
I love. You know what? It's funny because sometimes you almost forget the stories. And then, as you guys are bringing up Matt Cook, I'm like, oh, yeah, I remember when I went in the corner and gave him a couple of blockers. Now, funny enough, in today's rules, those blocker shots that we used to give back in the days, they're not allowed anymore. It's a 5 in a game. As soon as you give a blocker punch, you're getting tossed out. And we saw that in the season this year. So I wouldn't be able to do that anymore.
Well, we, as Rick said, I will echo his sentiment that we can't thank you enough for taking some time to chat with us today. Our listeners are going to very much enjoy the insight you provided today, and we can't wait to invite you back again on the Canadiens Connection podcast sometime soon, Marty, to chat with you again.
Oh, absolutely, anytime, and enjoy the summer, the off season, and we're gearing up for a great year this year. I think it's going to be a fun hockey season. It was fun last year, and I think this year is going to be even better.
Yeah, I agree.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Well, that was fabulous. Marty, he knows goaltending. He knows the NHL. He does have, we talked about his big goaltending book, and he has notes on every goaltender. He knows the situation inside out as well. He has a special tie with Quebec, with Montreal, so he pays particular attention to the Montreal Canadiens, and that was an incredible amount of insight on the league and then about the goaltending situation in particular for the Montreal Canadiens going forward.
A big thanks from all of us to Marty Biron for taking the time to chat with us and lend all his amazing insights. Like you said, if there's anything he knows, it's goaltending and it's hockey. A very knowledgeable guy, and honestly, it's great that we had an opportunity to talk to him specifically about the Montreal Canadiens, the situation here in Montreal. And with before we head into our third segment, the Have Your Say segment, we will ask our Canadiens Connection question of the week. Are you worried about the potential of losing Cayden Primeau on waivers this season? We want to make sure we hear from you. And with that, let's take our final break here. We'll hear from our sponsors. Stay with us. This is the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio.
Rocket Sports Media is currently recruiting talented, motivated, and committed people to join our team. If you're a student wishing to gain experience, a young professional interested in broadening your credentials, an experienced hockey mind looking for a platform to share your expertise, or a passionate fan looking to contribute to our publications by connecting with fellow hockey fans, we want to hear from you. If you are bright, loyal, passionate, and willing to dedicate yourself to a remarkable team, visit HabsHockeyReport.com and click the Join Our Team tab today. In every city around the world, sports fans flock to popular watering holes to share a few pints, some good grub, and to cheer for their team. Think your favorite sports bar deserves to be recognized? Or are you traveling to a new place and need to find the perfect spot to watch a game? HockeyPub.com is the answer. Find out where the best spots are in your city to eat, drink, and meet fellow fans. HockeyPub.com. Want the latest Habs news with game previews, reviews, and highlights? How about full coverage of development camps and special events? Looking to follow the Laval Rocket more closely this season? Or perhaps you'd like to learn more about team prospects? The Rocket Sports Media team has what you're looking for at thn.com/Montreal, the place where you'll find everything you need to be the most informed and connected Habs fan around. That's thn.com/Montreal.
Welcome back to episode 253 of the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio. You can follow at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and you can check out our website, canadiensconnection.fm. Also, feel free to text us anytime via the Rocket Sports text line. It's 5853-ROCKET. That's 5853-ROCKET. And what a great interview with Marty Biron. That was an amazing thing to listen back to and hear all those amazing insights. And goaltending is just one step in this long off season. And Rick, it's very difficult to keep track of these Montreal Canadiens, isn't it?
It is, but that's what we're here for, and we're here all summer. And listen, we're reaching out to guests to try and get you prepared for the upcoming season. You heard Marty Biron. He ended our discussion by saying he's really excited about this upcoming NHL season for the NHL in overall, but particularly the Montreal Canadiens. And I think, man, if you didn't get fired up by that interview, I don't know what I can say, because that should get you excited about. We talked last week about the influx of prospects that are going to be in Laval. We talked about the changes to the Canadiens lineup, and we talked about, with Marty Biron, the building out of the goaltending department for the Canadiens. Lots of exciting things to come. And again, only 7.5 weeks away from rookie camp.
So over those 7.5 weeks and even into the next season, make sure you're checking out thn.com/Montreal, where you can find all our Canadiens coverage in one place, including headlines, feature articles, amongst other things. That's your number one source for everything Montreal Canadiens. Also, you'll want to head over to our YouTube channel and search @AllHabs. Hit that subscribe button, because every single Thursday, Amy Johnson puts out episodes of the Habs Hockey Report show. The most recent episode is entitled "Why Alex Newhook's Contract is a Win for the Montreal Canadiens." She's great at interacting with all her viewers. She provides great knowledge and great analysis, so you'll definitely want to tune into that. Just make sure you hit subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment. Amy Johnson is great at responding to all the comments. Also, some of you may have noticed that we've started putting this podcast, the Canadiens Connection podcast, into our feed on YouTube. So every single Tuesday, you're going to find this podcast pop up there. You'll see some amazing graphics. I believe they're done by Amy Johnson. So if you're interested in listening and watching something, that's a great way to do it. If this podcast in its current form wasn't enough, head over to YouTube, watch it again. You'll have all sorts of great information there. And just remember, hit that subscribe button, and you can find it by searching @AllHabs. Also, make sure you subscribe to both Rocket Sports Radio podcasts on your favorite podcasting app. First and foremost, on Tuesday, The Press Zone comes out. You can find all the episodes at thepresszone.fm. That's hosted by Amy Johnson and Patrick Williams. They're both great at providing in-depth knowledge on the AHL Canadiens prospects. And honestly, this is just a really great listen. So if you're interested in what's happening in Laval, if you're interested in knowing more about all the Montreal Canadiens prospects, that's the best source for you to find out. And this podcast, The Canadiens Connection, you can find all our episodes at canadiensconnection.fm. If you have missed any, we're going to be here every single Saturday throughout this busy off-season to provide great interviews like the one we just had with Marty Biron, great analysis, news and updates. So while some of your other favorite podcasts and radio stations are taking a break from hockey, we don't rest. We don't go on vacation. We'll be here every single Saturday. Don't you worry, and you'll be able to get your full dose of the Montreal Canadiens right here.
And take us with you. As Marty said, you can go to the cabin, you can go to the lake, take the Canadiens Connection podcast, and while you're enjoying snacks, enjoying a beverage, sit back and make sure you don't miss anything about the Canadiens over the summer. That's what we're here for, and you're able to dial us up on your favorite podcast app, or, as you said, even on YouTube.
And Rocket Sports is recruiting. So if you're interested in joining the Rocket Sports team, feel free to reach out to us. I was once in this position where I was looking to gain some experience in podcasting and learn a little bit about it. And now I'm your host pretty much every week. So I definitely recommend joining Rocket Sports as a team. It's a great family. We have all sorts of amazing members to chat hockey with. We recruit every single year. And Rick, what else can you tell us about this?
Well, if you're interested, go to habshockeyreport.com, habshockeyreport.com. There's Join Our Team tab. Hit the Join Our Team tab, and there's some information we ask from you, what your interests are, what your experience is, and you can submit that, and we'll get back to you right away. And listen, whether it's you want experience in podcasts, if you want to contribute via the written form, if you want to help us out on social media, lots of different ways you can enjoy and connect with fellow Habs fans. We have a great Rocket Sports team. And now we have the opportunity for some of our members to contribute on the hockey news. So it's a really great opportunity for you to get involved and to learn something while you're at it.
Absolutely. So definitely recommend it. If you have interest, reach out to us and we'll have a little conversation with you. And our Canadiens Connection question of the week, as I said a few times earlier on the show, we want to ask this to our listeners. Are you worried about the potential of losing Cayden Primeau on waivers this season? You heard all sorts of insights from Marty Biron in the second segment during an interview about Cayden Primeau. We want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this? Make sure you reach out. And for those who missed it, our Rocket Sports text line, 5853-ROCKET.
Yeah, and this is an issue this year because it's the first year that Cayden Primeau has lost his waiver-exempt status, subject to waivers. So if the Canadiens try to send him to Laval, he's there for other teams to grab. Should the Canadiens be worried about that? Do you think that he'll make it through waivers and get to the Laval? We want to hear from you, and by all the methods we've mentioned, reach out to us.
Throughout the weeks, we do have plenty of our listeners reach out to us and send us all sorts of great messages and comments and many different varieties. And we like to sometimes point out some of those great messages. This one comes from Lucas in NDG, Quebec, and he's responding to Canadiens Connection episode 252. And Rick, what did he have to say?
Yeah, Lucas in NDG, Notre Dame de Grace, neighborhood in Montreal. I'm familiar with because that's where I went to work every day at LCC before I was doing this. And what he says, Lucas says, and he's this is in response to the Habs Prospects episode of the Canadiens Connection 252. He says, I watched Jesse Ylönen a lot in Laval. He's very skilled. With more ice time, I think he could be a breakout player in Montreal this year. Tell me what his contract's going to look like. Do you want to go first on this one, or do you want me to tackle this?
I'll let you tackle this one first, and then I'll chime in after.
Sure. I think first of all, why is it taking so long? Let's get it done, Kent. And I think it's going to be in the neighborhood of a 2-year contract, 900,000, 850, 900,000 thereabouts. Hopefully it's a one-way for both seasons. And that would put him, it would come in between the contracts. We know Michael Pezzetta got a new contract for 2 years at $812,000. Raphael Harvey-Pinard got a 2-year contract at $1.1 million. I think it's going to come in between those two players.
Yeah, I think that's probably about right. I wonder if what's holding this up is if Jesse Ylönen's pushing for that one-way deal. And money-wise, I think in and around what you said, I don't know that Jesse Ylönen will quite get to that 1 million status like Harvey Pinard, but a little bit less and a short-term deal, 1-2 years, just enough to prove himself, and he'll get an opportunity to establish himself as a player and then renegotiate for a brand new contract.
Yeah.
So in between this and next episode throughout the week, make sure you're watching out for that RFA signing of Jesse Ylönen, like we just talked about. As we were waiting for this last week, hasn't quite happened yet, so we're going to roll this into next week as well. And for those in Montreal, the Fantasia Film Festival is currently on. It's going to feature a Nicolas Cage tribute. But unfortunately, Nicolas Cage will no longer be able to be present at this film festival. But for those who enjoy films and local art, definitely check out that Fantasia Film Festival in Montreal.
Great tip.
So that's going to be a wrap for us today. Thank you all for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the Canadiens Connection podcast in the player or on any of your favorite podcasting apps. Make sure you also share on social media if you like what you heard. Enjoy the week. We'll be back here next Saturday, July the 29th for another great episode. Thank you all for listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio.
Click subscribe so you never miss an episode of Canadiens Connection. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Rocket Sports.